will the deep state allow Donald Trump to end the war in Ukraine, where they could have ended during the Biden administration instead of spending billions of dollars? Maybe they have decided that now is the time. Look, maybe the objective of the war was not to defeat Russia, free Ukraine, or whatever. See, first of all, the special military operation was not started by the Americans, by NATO. It was started by Putin, by Russia, by President Putin. And he was left with no choice but to do this. Otherwise, it would be like NATO on his borders, right at his borders, right at his doorstep, NATO missiles at his doorstep. He couldn't let that happen, so he was forced into that. If he had been a little smarter, I would say, with the benefit of hindsight, it's easier to say this. It's very easy to say this and criticize, but my point is, the right time to do that would have been 2014 when it took Crimea, actually. But, well, that's what we can say with the benefit of hindsight. It's not easy being in Mr. Putin's position. So he launched this special military operation, which we call the Ukraine war. And once this happened, obviously, the US, whoever runs the US, would have known that Putin will be left with no choice but to do this. And then you do some calculations, you do some war gaming, right? And one of the outcomes of this war has been the rapid deindustrialization of Europe. Nord Stream happened, the pipeline was blown up. One of the pipelines was blown up, the second one has been shut down, right? So Germany has been starved of cheap energy. Germany went into a recession, and now they are not doing well at all. They've been pouring money, that is taxpayer money, that is intended for Germany's development, into Ukraine. So all essentially the whole of Western Europe, EU and NATO nations, are kind of doing very poorly right now economically. Europe is being deindustrialized, essentially. The engine that always drove the European economy was Germany, and Germany is in the doldrums right now. So maybe the objective of this entire matter, the Ukraine war, of forcing Putin into starting the Ukraine war, was to actually deindustrialize Europe and turn Europe into an insignificant geopolitical entity. Perhaps that was the objective. And maybe that objective was even, well, it was bolstered by pushing in millions of undocumented illegal immigrants, so-called refugees, into Europe. Certain kinds of refugees, military-age males with almost no women and children. So that is kind of, yeah. And essentially almost all the EU countries have been forced into accepting very large numbers of refugees. So Europe is in a mess right now. And maybe the whole purpose of this Ukraine thing was to put Europe in this crisis. And it's a crisis that it's almost impossible for European nations to extricate them out of without leaving the EU, without leaving NATO. And that's not happening, right? So maybe the objective has been achieved. Now, Ukraine's purpose has been served, and Ukraine is just a disposable pawn on the chessboard, on the geopolitical chessboard. So now it's time to sacrifice that pawn. End of story. Now we will militarize Poland. So Poland is being quietly militarized. It's becoming Europe's primary military power. So Poland could be the next linchpin for NATO. So yeah, so if that is the case and the objective has been served, then it will be okay for Donald Trump to end the war in Ukraine, and through whichever means, negotiate with Putin, sit down, negotiate, and come to some kind of a deal. Maybe freeze the line of control where the Russian positions currently are, the front lines of the Russian positions. Maybe that sort of thing. Or maybe Putin will push for more, and we'll see how it goes. But yeah, Trump will most likely end the war in Ukraine, and probably the deep state's agenda has been served when it comes to Ukraine.